Hey gang, do you find yourself listening to your music on one app and then listening to your podcast on another app? If you do, stop this insane behavior right now and download Spotify. Spotify is home to all of your favorite music and all of your favorite podcasts. Podcasts including Fly on the Wall, the Saturday Night Live podcast with Dana Carvey and David Spade, the Rock on Tours podcast with Gary Kemp and Guy Pratt, old favorites like Fresh Air, My Favorite Murder, Wait, Don't Tell Me. Look, if you're looking for a news podcast or sports or entertainment or true crime, look, if you're looking for a sewing podcast or an RV podcast, Spotify has all of this for you. That's Spotify. All of your favorite music and all of your favorite podcasts in one place. Find it in your app store and start listening today. That's Spotify, music and podcasts. Let's get down.
And you may ask yourself, well, how did I get here?
It's time for How Did I Get Here? And now here are your hosts, Johnny Maldi.
All right. Hello, I'm Johnny. I'm your host. Welcome to the show. I hope you guys all had a good weekend, whatever it is you did this weekend. Man, looking at Instagram today on Monday, I'm flipping through, and it looks like there was so much stuff going on this weekend. It's almost hard to believe that much stuff was going on just here in Austin. In your town, probably too, if you don't live in Austin. Yeah, there were shows, there were parties, there were bazaars with like vendors and bands and food trucks and events and all this kind of shit. And it all looked like it was packed. So that's great. People are getting out and doing stuff again. It seems like life is creeping back to normal, even though there is a surge of coronavirus going around. Seems like people are doing all right. Okay, I'm saying that. I'm hoping for the best for everyone. Hey gang, I know there's a lot of stuff going on this weekend too, but I wanted to let you know that the band I'm in, Skyrocket. If you don't know Skyrocket, go to skyrockettheband.com, see what we're all about. It's a great time. We are playing Friday night, December 16th. That's this Friday here in Austin, Texas at the legendary nightclub Antones. That's right. Go to skyrockettheband.com, get your tickets there, find out what's going on. Come on out to the show. It's going to be a great time. Gang, I've had a not wacky, I'll be honest with you. It's been a rough couple of days. My siblings and I have had to sort of get together and figure out what we're going to do about our dad. And that's not an easy thing to do because he wants nothing to do with us figuring out what we're going to do with him. But his neuropathy and diabetes has gotten so bad that he had to go to the emergency room this weekend, and we're finding out that after some tests, they're definitely going to have to amputate a couple of toes, but they don't know what else they're going to have to amputate. So it's a dark time, but he's not facing up to it, and he's not being realistic about it, and he's been in a really fucked up place like in his life. At least, for the last few years, for the last 20 years, but like really for the last few months. Like I went to Miami at the end of September to see my brother, just had a new baby, and also see all my siblings, my nephew, AJ, meet my new nephew, and see my dad because I'd heard that dad had been kicked out of his friend's house where he was living and was living in his car. And he has been living in his car since the beginning of September, sorry. So it's been like about definitely 3 months. Almost 4 that he's been in there, like 3.5 months. He's been living in his car in this level of unhealth and having to this is the 3rd time to the hospital since he's been living in his car. And I know that the doctors have been warning him, but he doesn't really tell us what's good. It's just a very, very frustrating situation. Plus we're all learning, like, how do you put your dad in a place? You know what I mean? Like when he gets out of this thing, he's definitely going to be missing a couple of toes. He's not walking well anyway. Who knows what the hell else he's going to have amputated. And so we're all trying to figure out, like, how do you get your dad in a place? Like, none of us have ever done that before. So, like, I'm calling friends this morning that I know they just recently put their parents in a place. And like, how do you do this? How do you take care of it? And the thing is, my dad is can be incredibly unpleasant, really mean, opinionated, narcissistic, and just mean. And no one wants him to live with them. And that's been the tough part about all of this, is that he's burned so many bridges in his life that he's got nowhere to go anymore except living in his car for the last few months. And that's It's a sad thing to do when you're getting close to 80, you know? So anyway, so the last few days have been consumed with phone calls with my siblings, trying to figure out how you do this, looking at websites together, trying to figure out what his insurance is. Also, brothers and sisters trying to get in there and make sure that he's telling his doctors the truth, because he has a strange relationship with the truth. It's very difficult for him to always tell the truth. And if he's telling us stuff that's happening, it's not necessarily true. Like the way that we found this stuff out was my sister happened to be there in the hospital yesterday when the doctor came in and told him about the amputations. So anyway, that's where I've been at the last few days. It's been an intense and a weird thing. And if you listen to the show, my relationship with my dad is not great. I don't have a tremendous amount of. I love him. That's what I have. I love him, and there's a sort of dedication to keep this relationship alive. I don't know if it's because my mom died when I was a teen and this is the last of my parental things. Even though it doesn't work, I still try and shove a square peg into a round hole constantly. I don't know, man. So that was basically the crux of my weekend, looking at a lot of old folks' homes in South Florida. There's a lot of them. They're also very packed. So that's also a tough thing. Anyway, that's where I've been at, and it's been weird, but I know things will get better. I think my brothers and sisters and I have been able to find a solution that when he gets out of there, he'll be able to go to a place and be safe and comfortable and housed, because it's scary to think of your dad as not living in a home, having to have shit amputated because his health is so bad, and he's just living in a car, at a park or some shit. Whew. Anyway, thanks for listening to that. I had to unload somewhere, and I really appreciate you guys. I also, look, it's not all tits and champagne over here at How Did I Get Here headquarters. Sometimes you got to deal with some real shit. But I got Rosie. She's loving on me. I got my family. I'm leaving on Monday to Houston to just go spend the whole week with my family till Christmas. Spend time with my grandma, my aunts, my cousin's baby. They're coming down from New York. It's going to be great. So, and Rosie will have lots of time outside. So, I've got stuff to look forward to. Hopefully we can straighten this shit out with my dad and be in a better place. Okay? Thank you for listening. Gang, I have a great show for you guys today. Those of you that live here in Austin, you may not know this guy, but I'm going to introduce you to a fantastic artist named Ward White. He has just he's been putting out albums for a while. His last record, Tender Age, came out in 2021 to amazing reviews. He's viewed as like a Bowie-esque art rock crooner with power pop tendencies. That's what I would say. His latest album, which is his 14th album, Ice Cream Chords, is available now wherever it is you stream and download music. Fucking great album. He's a fantastic songwriter. His production ideas are great. He's a great musician. He's a fantastic singer. I enjoyed his voice so much. You can find him at wardwhite.net. And we just had a really, really, really great conversation about his journey in music and about where he gets his inspiration and how he's kept on going and how he's ended up making 14 records, how he lived in New York for many years and now he lives in Los Angeles, about his friendship with Mark Mothersbaugh and all the kind of stuff that he's been able to do with him, Mark Mothersbaugh from Devo. Anyway, Ward White, great guy, great musician, great conversation. I hope you enjoyed it. It was done via Zoom. Hopefully we'll be getting back to way more real life conversations in 2023. I hope so. I enjoy the Zoom ones because I get to meet people from all over the world, but I love people coming over to the house and hanging out. Hopefully one day Ward White will. Go check out his album Ice Cream Chords because it's absolutely fantastic. Also his last record, The Tender Age, fantastic record as well. He's got 14 fucking records, so get out there and get involved somehow. Ice Cream Chords is out via VF14 Records. You can find him at wardwhite.net. Get out there and get involved and enjoy my conversation with this brilliant musician, Ward White. Let's get down.
Lost in Wallis in the rain. Easter Sunday and the butcher shop is closed. No more songs about the train. Edgar Allan and the Pope are indisposed. Would you care to comment? We're going live.
Dude, okay, first of all, I don't even know where to start with you, dude. Thanks for reaching out.
Oh no, my pleasure.
Really?
And thank you for getting back at me.
Yeah, it's not just a pleasure to have you on the show. It's a pleasure to now have a new artist that I'm listening to all the time.
Oh,
This is
geez, well,
great. Yeah.
that's incredibly flattering. Thank you.
Yeah, man. This record, Ice Cream Chords, it'll be out by the time this show drops. It's fucking great, man. You are such a great singer. You're such a great songwriter, great musician, great producer. Like,
Wow, I'll take it. Thank you.
yeah, man. It's a real pleasure. Like, sometimes people will write you and be like, hey, I want to be on the thing. And you're like, oh, man. But I was like, oh, how did he know I was looking for a guy like this to listen to?
It's just
Yeah.
dumb luck. Sometimes works out.
Nice surprise. Well, I'm glad you reached out, and congratulations on this is your 14th record. So my first foray into your music was a seasoned Ward.
Yes, yeah, season maybe a tad burned at this point, but yes, seasoned I think would be a fair assessment.
Yeah, I mean,
as far as the record making process.
There's a thing that happens. I feel like I'm 54. I'm sure you're probably younger, but there's a thing that happens, and it's supposed to happen. You're supposed to get better. Like, I'm a musician as well. You're supposed to get better.
Right.
But we're in this industry that fetishizes the youth, that sometimes by the time you get to they don't want Yoda level stuff. But like, this is like real, like you have found your trip and you are fucking great at it.
Wow. That's, that's wonderful to hear. And you're absolutely right on that point. It's a shame that we sort of are locked into that showbiz aspect that doesn't apply to other art forms. When you look at
Right.
authors or painters or sculptors, these are people who, are respected for doing their deepest work,
Right.
in the autumn of their careers, because they have really built to this level, and there's a complete respect for that. Whereas we're looked at as past our prime, if we've been hanging around for more than 8.5 minutes. But it takes time to be good at something.
Yeah, it does take time. And you live in LA, in the epicenter of the show business.
I do. I've been here about 7 years now, but I was a New York guy forever. I grew up in the Northeast, and I was in New York City for like 22 years.
Okay, so that was Pete's Candy Store was like a gig you normally played.
Oh yeah. Every room that there was in town between 1995 and 2015.
Oh yeah, so Rockwood and like
Rockwood, and then going back to the mid and late 90s, which is sort of the peak of the showcase room with Mercury Lounge and Brownies and Luna and that whole grouping in the East Village. That was really ground zero for everything that was happening at that point. Yeah. But there were so many other great rooms too. I mean, little rooms. I was looking at a list I found in an old notebook the other day where I had just made a point of writing down every room I could remember having played in New York. And it was something like 60 venues. And it surprised me, even the volume of them, that there were that many that were running concurrently and actually doing some decent business.
Yeah.
And of course, it was just disheartening to see, how many of those are long gone.
Yeah.
But there was a period there where I remember I could play 2-3 times in a week. You can't really do that now. They want you to keep, 3 weeks between gigs, and you could just kind of bounce around rooms, and there was enough support there that you could do it. Yeah.
Do you? I was looking through your Instagram and stuff. It doesn't look like you're playing a lot of shows or anything now.
I mean, I'm not at the moment. The whole this pandemic. I don't know if you heard about it, but
What
was this thing. It might have just been in my house.
I spent a year in my apartment for a year and a half because I thought it would be super awesome.
Exactly. Turned out it wasn't. But no, I think that really was kind of a point where I was like, you know what, I'm going to step back a little. And I think I have kind of rested probably longer than I should have. It's time with this record, I'll need to get back out and start doing some shows.
Yeah.
I've always been primarily a studio animal. I mean, that's where I'm most in my element and where I enjoy the work the most.
Yeah.
But I love to perform too. It's just I just got to kind of kick myself in the ass and put the band back together, as it were, and go out and do some shows for this record.
Yeah. Yeah. You were playing at where, like Hotel Cafe, I saw before the pandemic and stuff like that. That's a good place. But were you doing like band shows as well, or were those shows with the band? Just
there were some with a band. You know, it was usually sort of pared down. You know, it would never be more than 4 pieces.
Yeah.
Which is sometimes a challenge for the records that I make because, you know, production wise, they're pretty dense. You know, there's a lot of layering. There's a lot of, you know, there's stacked vocals.
Yeah.
There's a lot of these touches and elements that are really kind of key to the whole thing that obviously from a practical standpoint are very difficult to reproduce on stage without, you know, wrangling a very, very large group of people and making their calendars coalesce so that, you know how it is. It's a tricky thing to do. So I think there's a bit of that can be cowing, you know, to me, where it's like, oh God, I want to do it, but I want to do it right. And it's it becomes so complicated. So often what I would do instead is I'll do solo shows, which seems like, all right, that's going to be the compromise rather than kind of half address stuff that's on the record. Just go out and completely rethink them and do them solo.
You know what fucks with me on that stuff, because I play as well, and I've done both things, and I love the studio. Like my whole place is just a studio with like shit to record and pianos and organs and guitars and fucking Rhodes and
that's it. Just live surrounded by it.
Yeah. And I love recording and I love the whole thing, but there is that thing also. What ended up happening with me is that you end up doing a bunch of solo shows, and then you have people that are like, they only like you with the band, and then there's the side of people that only like you by yourself. Like, oh God, you're just so loud, and it's just so like I can't understand the words. And
Right. You know, and this is it's a thing that everybody comes up against. If you make a lot of music, and you like a lot of different kinds of music, you're going to have an impulse to make different kinds of sounds. And I think that's where Neil Young always had it right. You know, he's like, look, I love to do this Neil Young thing. I love to do the Harvest thing.
Exactly.
But I also want to do Crazy Horse. Yeah. So it's going to be 2 separate entities.
Yeah.
And this way everybody's happy, because you're going to have the Crazy Horse fans are going to be pissed off if I pull out an acoustic guitar and vice versa. So like, I'm not even going to try to mix them.
Yeah.
They'll be out at the same time, but it's just it's a different avenue to do something very specific.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, you know, he's a terrible example to use because he's had such a unique career.
God, yeah.
Like the most respected guy, also a guy that got sued by his record company for not sounding enough like himself.
I know. And you know, had the spine to really stand up to it, to the point where David Geffen actually pulled back and later years came back and apologized. You know, he said, I was completely in the wrong for that. And he was. And that's I love Trans. I non-ironically love that record.
Yeah. That's funny that you say this, Ward, because I remember, like, I was a kid. There was a video on MTV,
right,
for a song, and he was playing the Gretsch, the Les Paul. Sorry, the Les Paul with the Bigsby, his main black Les Paul,
right,
and he had one of those like a boy band mic on his head. And he was wearing like sunglasses, and I thought that stuff was real cool. But then I read this piece about it maybe like 6 months ago, where he explained what that record, like the intention behind that record, was to communicate with his kids. Do you understand this?
With his son,
yeah.
It was completely nonverbal, and it was this idea that he had that there's got to be a way to get through.
Yeah.
And so he created that character, and you know that boy band mic he's wearing, that's actually that was a Sennheiser vocoder,
right?
Which he actually even used on stage. He used it, and Nils Lofgren had one. And when they did the tour for Trans, you know, they actually brought that rig out and performed with it.
That video was live. I remember that video for that song was at a concert.
It's from Berlin. It was a show they did in Berlin. It's a little hard to find now. But that's a pretty interesting band he put together with that.
Yeah.
And but people really didn't know what the hell to think of it.
Yeah.
But I think it's remarkable. And really, they're beautiful songs.
Amazing. Amazing.
They really are.
When you go back and listen to it and know and then really listen to it, it's kind of breathtaking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to have the guts to do that. And again, you say Neil is the classic terrible example because he's just such an avatar. He is an island unto himself. You can't really compare anyone to him.
No. Everything about like his career, his voice, his songwriting, everything he does, how he can just leave bands and everybody still likes him.
I know, it's the thing about it. And, I've heard it said by people who work with him, David Crosby says it and Stephen Still says it, these are people who still are able to be, pissed off for 60 years, but they'll come out and have to say, that's just Neil.
Yeah.
And if you're going to be part of Neil's universe, you have to accept it. That one day he's going to walk away and you don't know when or if he's going to come back. He usually does. It might be in a week. It might be in 20 years.
Yeah.
But you just have to take it. That's who Neil is.
Right. Ward, you came on the right show.
I'm glad.
I'm really glad that this is great. Like, you're also a fucking nerd.
Oh God. Yeah, of course. I mean, you don't do this for this long.
No.
Without being, damaged in all the right ways.
Yeah. All right. So this record is going to come out on VF14 Records, and I saw you made some videos for your last record. I wrote it down somewhere. I can't. The Tender Age.
Yes.
Are you going to make some videos for this one? Are there videos out that I didn't see?
No, we do. In fact, we are finishing up edits as we speak. We just shot this, and it's for the song Mezcal Moth.
That's the first single. Great song, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, it's a song that's got a lot happening conceptually. And, this video is a good vehicle to sort of show the cinematic aspects of the narrative such that it is in this song. And I think once you see the visuals that go with it, it's going to make a lot of what's happening in the song make sense, because that is pretty layered in there.
Yeah.
The idea of the song is it's sort of a past his prime, now fallen and disgraced, pop singer, songwriter who was, once the great toast of the town and is now in hiding somewhere in the jungle in Mexico. Can't go back to the United States because he is going to be tried for crimes against art. And the whole thing is a riff on, the Leonard Cohen dictum that a singer must die for the lie in his voice.
Yeah.
That eventually everyone is going to kill you for what they love about you. So he's there. He's doing 2 shows a day in this, club that's run by, someone who's very friendly with the expats, but is also falling into the political turmoil. And eventually things change. There's a revolution and he's got to get the hell out. So all this is happening in the song. And the whole thing is based on lyrical references from Bob Dylan's Just Like Tom Thumb's Blues. So he's there, lost in the rain in Juarez, as it were, and he's sort of delusional in imagining himself as Bob Dylan writing this song while he's trying to get out. So that's a lot to put through in a 3.5-minute song. So the visuals, I think, help with that. Yeah. So yes, that will be
shit, man.
Well, you got to write about something. Once you've made as many albums as I have, you start just going to different places.
Yeah, I mean, are how in these songs? I see a lot of that you've been compared a lot to Bowie, and I get it vocally, and I get the art part of your music and sort of adventurous nature of it definitely reflects that. How much of this stuff, like especially on this record, the Ice Cream Chords, how much of this record, like of these songs, are you in, or are these narrative stories of fiction?
Well, that's it's an interesting question. I don't write in that sort of traditional first person confessional narrative that you would expect from a singer-songwriter, not to use that horrible hyphenate term, but I did for a long time, and then I just think I got to the point where I was wanting to express things differently. It's just you're going to run out of things. You can only get divorced so many times. It's like no one needs to hear another record about So where do you go? And I did really start writing in characters.
Yeah.
And so what you'll hear are often snatches of narrative, but they aren't always linear. So I don't always know what's going on in the songs.
Right.
I just hear these pieces of conversations in my head, and I will start to stitch them together, and I'll try to follow the lead that they present.
Yeah.
But to answer the question, am I in it? Absolutely, because I think if you're an artist, no matter what the nature of your art is, it reflects you. It's,
right.
You may paint plein air paintings, but you're not just painting a sunset, you're painting your interpretation of this sunset. Everything is about you. Everything is through your filter, through your prism.
Right.
So
right.
Yes, even though it is not specifically my voice directly,
right.
I am talking about me and my experience in life.
Right. So you're from the East Coast, born?
Yeah.
And where?
Yeah. I was born in Boston,
okay.
but didn't really spend much time there. Moved to Connecticut and then was in New York City, as I say, for several decades.
How old were you when you when you decided that this was something you wanted to pursue? Like what was going on in your life then?
It's that point where does it cross over from just a fixation into an idea? It's like, well, I guess this is what I do.
Yeah.
Pretty early, I guess. I started playing guitar around 10 or 11 years old.
Did you ask for the guitar, or did they give it to you?
It was my brother was playing a little bit, so it was kind of in the house, and I was like, well, all right, I'll try it too. And the thing was, I wasn't especially enthusiastic about it because, like a lot of people, you're young, you pick it up and you want to be good really fast.
And you're not.
And it was terrible. Of course, you're supposed to be terrible. If you're not terrible, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
And so I played, and so it was hard to get into. It was just the classic case. I didn't really start to develop as a player until I happened to start making music with a couple of friends of mine who were much better than I was.
Right.
Which is always what gives you that push to say, oh shit, well, if I want to keep doing this, I got to up my game.
Yeah.
So that little competitive aspect is actually the best way to improve as a performer, is play with people who are better than you are. That was probably around time I was 13 or so. And, we had a band, our little band, and we actually made 2 full-length albums that did the classic Tascam Porta one, did them ourselves.
Fuck
made
yeah, dude.
Very, very punky, photocopied artwork, and we daisy chained cassette decks and made copies and typed out labels and sold them in school. And it was,
that is cool, man.
We were definitely bought into the concept.
Yeah.
And that was pretty strange stuff. We were all pop music and rock music fans, but we were also kind of into more experimental stuff. I was particularly blown away early on by hearing Velvet Underground and Nico. And I was about 13 years old when I heard that record.
Wow.
And it was a great example of, I hear this record, I have no idea what it's about, but I have a feeling it's something important, and also it scares the crap out of me.
Yeah.
And that's the best way to just get your hooks into a young teenager is it scares me a little bit, feels a little dangerous. And that to me is a shame because that's what rock and roll is supposed to be without going to the worst corny place of all.
Right.
But that's what's gone from it. There's no danger. There's no sense of danger to it.
Yeah.
But that really, I got into that and went, so some of this record is straight ahead, kind of like punky stuff. And then some of it are like, found sound, pieces, like long, like 14-minute things. And we would do stuff. We put, we got one of those suction cup microphones that you could put on the handset of a phone. For everybody who remembers telephone handsets, and just made strange phone calls to I remember we called up all of the answering machines of the very back of the Village Voice, which is where all the call girl ads were, and they all had answering machines at the time, and they would have these long messages. And we would leave strange, messages for them of just nonsensical, kind of surreal things. And so we have a lot of those messages sort of interweaved through it, and we did some odd stuff. And we were called the Puce Moment.
Were you guys? Sorry, really quickly. Were you guys?
Yeah.
Were you guys like extremely intelligent and sort of gifted kids, or were you on drugs?
Well, where do you say 6 and 1? At the time. No, at the time we were really not. We were pretty innocent in that regard.
I mean, that's
we were young.
That's highly sophisticated. I mean, that's. I mean, that as a piece of art, a 14-minute thing with like phone call. I mean, that's a pretty interesting piece of art for somebody to make at that age.
I would say that, yeah, we were odd. We were definitely odd, but we were also fairly precocious that way. And, it was just a combination of things. I was into all, I sort of exploded my interest into all these arts at once. I was into music. I was heavily into film and literature.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to incorporate all of this energy somehow. Obviously the skill set was very limited at the time, but the impulse was very strong.
Yeah.
So the idea that you can act on something at that point because you're too young to know any better.
Right.
You can make some interesting work.
That to me, that's the very definition of art rock.
Yeah.
To me.
Yeah.
Exactly what you just said. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
We were called the Puce Moment. So even to the extent of the name, we were named after a Kenneth Anger film, which is
Jesus.
Pretty obscure for 13-year-old suburban kids.
Yeah.
We made 2 records, and then of course it all fell apart for personality differences and artistic squabbles, and as all the big groups do, and we collapsed under the burden of our own genius, and somehow we're still here. And eventually, some years later, we got driver's licenses. Which is exactly the story of Fleetwood Mac. But so that was pretty early on. It was just I really, really got sucked into this multi-tracking, like, oh shit, I can make a record, and I can do all the pieces myself. That Porta 1 was like Godhead to me. I mean, and then I really got pulled into the science of engineering and all that, which to this day I'm still a complete gearhead.
Yeah.
And I just never stopped writing and making these records. There are dozens and dozens of like old cassette only releases that I did. I found some was at my mother's house recently, and did the old went into the dump pile. Some old boxes of like new old stock cassettes, stuff. I was like, oh God, I forgot I even did this. So it's been like constant, and I've basically, I think I probably seriously got into putting records together in the late 90s, and then it's just been a record every year or year and a half since then. I'm really pushing hard to put a record out every year now. I like having that schedule.
So were you always very prolific? I mean, it sounds like you were.
Yeah. I think I just, I got it into my head early on that the key to it is you never stop working.
Yeah.
You have to keep working.
Yeah,
and I still think that's essential.
I don't think enough artists look at it in like a sports perspective, where how can you expect to win a marathon if you're not running 26 miles every day? You can't wake up and just run a marathon. You're not going to make a brilliant fucking record if you're not trying to make a fucking record that sucks. Right? Neil Young himself said, yes, I do write when inspiration comes, but I find that inspiration comes after I've been working on something for a couple of hours.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that is, we all know that's the dirty secret of talent or genius, is that you got to work. I mean, it's a process, and I'll hear a lot of really talented people, who will say to me, I want to get this done, or I want to put it together. It's just too much time. And I'm like, I understand that, but there is a part of it where you really do just have to sit down and say, okay, this This is what I'm doing. And, I think part of it is driven by this, kind of baseline anxiety that I'm sure all creative people have, that one day, what if it's gone?
Yeah.
What if you go to the well one day and it's
Yeah.
dry?
Yeah.
Like, so if I can do it, I'm going to do it, because every record, it might be the last one. This might be the last song I ever write. And so I've tried to just keep that, and just not being precious about the records. I think that's
Yeah.
essential too. But, I've always said it's like every record for me is just the one after the last one and before the next one.
Yeah.
And then, that way you look at the whole body of work rather than individual records. And we keep coming back to Neil Young, but he's a great example. You don't think of, what's the best Neil Young record? You don't really, break it down into those little pieces. You look at the career. It's the whole arc of the career. That's the work. That's the work of art, is everything that's happened in all those decades.
Yeah.
And I like that, idea, rather than, okay, we were a band or we were an artist. We made 4 records. 2 of them were really good. And that's what you get. This way it's just, you're never really tied to this one statement, because, if you're doing your job, you should change in what you want to do.
Yeah.
I think, you can't just keep regurgitating.
Yeah. How did you connect with, obviously there's a power pop base to your songwriting too. You can grasp the idea of a hook, how to deliver
Oh, yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where does that come
I
from?
mean, I think it's just, being a record person, and I think this applies to most people who would qualify themselves as record people, is that you have really wide ranging tastes.
Yeah.
If you're truly bought in to any music or art, if you want to see all the different shades.
Yeah.
So, I'm a person who I love metal. I love prog. I love bluegrass. I love R&B. I love, I'll listen to opera. I love classical. It's not this, I only do this, this, and this. So when you have that coming into your ears all the time, you're going to take aspects from all of them. And then as a writer, you're going to say, all right, well, there's certain things that I gravitate to because I'm more comfortable with them. But I want to, integrate, some elements from a different kind of music as well. So there's always going to be that pop thing. I grew up listening to AM radio, and that was really the great masterclass.
Yeah.
Because it was a good time for, not just current stuff, but they were still playing, older records as well. So, I heard a lot of stuff, the current 70s stuff, but also, a lot of great 60s records that were still in regular rotation.
Right.
So it was, while you'd hear Fleetwood Mac, or you'd hear Jim Croce, or you'd hear James Taylor, you could also hear, so many of these great Bacharach records with Dionne Warwick, or you'd hear, that sort of really classic, orchestral pop stuff.
Yeah.
And I was really, a big fan of that as well. So, it just all comes together, and you hear different things at different times. I look back over the years, and there's a sound on a record. There was a while where I was doing kind of twangier stuff. I was really heavy into Graham Parsons and Hank Williams. And although I didn't really present it that way, was always, it was an undercurrent. It was a flavor that was there. And then you kind of move into whatever your next trip is, and then I really went heavy into more of an orchestral thing with strings and kind of Baroque aspects and electric harpsichord and all that kind of classic stuff. But, it varies over time.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is always an underpinning of pop and melody. It's always melody, and it's always lyric for me.
Yeah. Who were some of your early sort of standout artists that their sort of songwriting spoke to you?
The earliest, from a real nuts and bolts songwriting perspective, was Chuck Berry.
Oh yeah.
And, it was really the first record that I was given. My father had bought me one of these really cheap, K-Tel kind of compilations.
Yeah.
Like one of those Morris Levy things where it's just use all these copyrights that I own and cram. It was a triple album in this really thin paper sleeve. It was called Chuck Berry and His Friends, which sort of a, funny statement when you think about it. But, the Chuck stuff just blew me away. And it was really, it was the literary nature
Yeah.
of his lyrics, because the word is always what I've been drawn to, and he was the master. He really created the blueprint for anything close to literary aspirations in rock and roll lyrics, and he did it beautifully. I mean, there is no Elvis Costello couplet without the work that Chuck Berry did. He was the master of the perfect rhyme. I mean, he was so clean with it. I mean, he was like Stephen Sondheim in early rock and roll. It's just like every line was pitch perfect, and he could tell that story in 2 minutes and 5 seconds, and he did it beautifully. I mean, to me, Memphis, Tennessee is just is such a sophisticated example of storytelling. It begins in medias res. It's a person we don't know in the middle of a phone conversation with an opera. I mean, what a really unique way to jump into a song of that era. And then, of course, it has the big de Maupassant payoff at the end.
Yeah.
Ironically, he's not talking about the wife that ran away. He's talking about the daughter that's been taken away from him. And it's like, oh God, all of a sudden it's not Chuck Berry. It's like freaking Raymond Carver at this point. There's just such a depth to that drama, but doing it so beautifully. And he could just knock those out of the park every single time. Plus, he was a son of a bitch of a guitar player.
Yeah.
And, one of the great masters. And so that really hit me hard when I was young.
And apparently a legitimate son of a bitch, too.
Man, he was, Chuck was no joke in any aspect of his life. And all of the stories, I believe they're all true, and probably even more true than they are true.
I have a good journalist friend. Sorry to interrupt you. A good journalist friend.
No.
And like an Esquire guy. And the late 90s, he had a videotape of Chuck. Some stuff you just didn't want to know about. It ruined me for a little while.
Oh yeah, that was a bad one, and that made quite the circulation. Yes, that was. We are all
him
familiar.
Showing it to me, and like at the end of it, I was like, "Why did you do that?" That was like horror. Like now, I'm like, that's like watching like Faces of Death or something. I've never seen it, but I'm sure you're like, ah.
Yeah, that is definitely some unseeable, unseeable.
Right. I will
content.
never unsee that.
That's correct.
But
That's
yes,
correct.
what a masterful. It's funny. It seems like I feel like that conversation about him. I'm hearing it more nowadays about Chuck's actual, just his songwriting prowess. And power.
I mean, he really, again, as someone who was just as drawn to literature as I was to music, to have somebody who had that amazing control of language was just icing on the cake. It was like, oh, this is it. But, obviously, anybody who makes a record that's worth listening to was suckered in by the Beatles very early and hopefully has carried that their whole lives. And I certainly have.
Yeah. But it makes sense that then you would be attracted to the Velvet Underground, because that's another, also just this new level. It's almost like a Bukowski, or what's the heroin guy that everybody loves so much? Yeah. What's his name?
Hubert Selby, thinking like Last Exit to Brooklyn, or...
No, Naked Lunch. William Burroughs. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that dark side, that was, which to me was complete, of course, in my life was pretty alien, but, was very compelling to me. And I certainly wanted to know more. But it's interesting, that record, which in as dark as it is, we can't forget the fact that Lou was actually coming from a very sort of Tin Pan Alley songwriter tradition.
Right.
He had been, his job was working as this, staff songwriter for Pickwick Records.
Right.
Where they were just doing these cheapo records. They couldn't actually pay to license any of the real hits of the day. So they'd say to Lou, all right, Lou,
write a knockoff of this.
And then write something that's kind of like this, then we'll come up with a funny name and do 20 of those today.
Yeah.
And that was his job. And, so he really, that was where Lou's heart was, so much of it, we like doo-wop, and you see that come out in his records later. And sometimes it's like, God, what is Lou on about here? It's like, well, of course, this was the music he grew up with. And that's really where his heart was.
Yeah.
So there really is that classic girding of pop sensibility, even in the most experimental aspects of the Velvet Underground.
Yeah, there is. That's probably why it works so well and why it's so appealing, because it has both.
Absolutely.
Both
And, you know,
aspects of it.
where we, you know, John Cale was really the more classically trained, you know, art with a capital A kind of character. And he brought that sensibility and, you know, stuff that Lou really wasn't familiar with. But what a combination. And God, and I adore John Cale as well. And, you know, all those records that are just, Fear is just an absolutely outstanding record, and Paris 1919, and just, I think his stuff is incredible. And it's actually the best show I ever saw in my life.
Really?
Was John Cale with Chris Spedding at the Lone Star Roadhouse.
Where's that?
Long gone now. It was in New York. There were two locations, but this one was the downtown one, which was on like Fifth Avenue and 12th Street, somewhere thereabouts. And they would do two shows a night. And we went in, we saw it, and we just stayed and watched it again. But it was just the fact that it was so intense and so stripped down. And he was primarily just playing a Rhodes electric piano, and then Chris Spedding playing a lot of like slide electric guitar. But it was a tiny little club, so we were just in seats like 6 feet from him, which at the time for me, and I was just a kid, it was amazing that all of a sudden this guy was there. It's like, wow, that's the guy from the album cover, and he's an actual human being.
Yeah.
And he's so intense, and so very Welsh. And he was staring at me, and I thought he was just like staring through my soul while he, played his dirge of Heartbreak Hotel. I'm like, this is amazing. Like, this is what live music should be. All I had really seen prior to that had been like, big arena rock concerts, which are great.
Yeah.
But it's a very, very different experience. That was much more spiritual, if to use an overused term.
Yeah. So when you moved to New York, did you have a band and stuff, or were you doing solo stuff?
No, I came out, I came to New York really with almost nothing. I really knew very few people, if any. And I'd initially been coming in, I was doing sound for a friend's band, because when I was back in Connecticut, I had a studio in my house where I recorded a lot of local bands. And this guy had drummed on some of my stuff, and he said, "Hey, my band, we could use a sound guy if you want to come on." I didn't know, so yeah, sure. So I would go into the clubs, and of course, sound guy would take one look at me and like, "Oh, Jesus, here we go." But at the time, it's like, "Great, one more time for me to do coke in the bathroom, have at it," And so I was like, "All right." So I got to know the clubs, and got an apartment there, and kind of lucked into a job through the guy who was the bass player in that band. Also worked for an artist management firm that had a studio as well. And so my first job there was, I was the receptionist for this artist management firm. So I really got a pretty early education in how the business ran, the actual,
cool.
how the sausage is made, situation, which was great because, I was completely, I had no clue.
Yeah.
I got to meet a lot of great people, and there was a studio there as well. So I was able to, pull musicians then from this pool of people that I met. And then actually the very first gig I did in New York was the notorious audition night at CB's.
Oh.
Which is pretty much the only gig you could get sight unseen. Like if you were in town and you hadn't played and you didn't really have a reputation there.
Right.
You would just call. You'd call up Hilly, and there was like a time, I can't remember what, it was like a Tuesday, you'd call between noon and 3 or something.
Yeah.
And they just write your name down in a notebook and say, "You're going on at 11. I think it was Tuesday nights. I can't remember. But that was the trial by fire. It was up on that CB stage in that CB's bathroom. And it's like, wow, all right, we're here.
Dude, I was on a label that was owned by Lars Ulrich. That was a subsidiary of Elektra. And we did a press showcase at CBGB's, and we also did a photo shoot for a guitar magazine there, me and the guitar player. And at first they took us down like, "Oh yeah, we got to do it. Legendary, man. You guys get in a stall." Dude, we were in there like a minute and a half, and I was like, "Dude, I'm going to fucking throw up. Like, we got to do this somewhere else." So they had that gallery thing next door, and so we went and did it there. They had a nice curtain or whatever. But yeah, that bathroom, man, Jesus. That stage too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The whole thing. I mean, even when I, the few times that I played it early on, CB's was on its way down already at that point. But I really liked the CB's gallery space, and I played there a ton.
Yeah.
It was a great booker there, a woman named Micheline. And she was really very supportive of me. And that was it was a completely different vibe in that room. You could play quietly or semi-quietly.
Yes.
And it was laid out in a way that if you had a small crowd, it didn't feel empty, but you could also get a larger group of people in there. I really dug that venue. A lot of great, if you were a songwriter, rather than a band,
Right,
because,
right.
there was a lot of, there was kind of a thing at a certain point in New York, kind of late 90s, like every band was supposed to sound like Bush or something, it's just that's just not the trip I was on at all. So if I go to Mercury Lounge to book it, I think, you're not really going to fit on this bill. So that was a great venue. I really liked that place.
Yeah. I love Mercury too. I always had a fun time there. I also enjoyed that you could smoke in that backstage downstairs thing without anybody.
Oh yeah, down
yeah,
down in the basement there.
Yeah.
That was you had if you were more than like 5'8", you really had to watch your head in that basement though.
Dude, I'm 5'7".
You made it.
Yeah, I loved it down there. It was a perfect little. It was like a little mole village down there for me.
Yeah. I had to kind of do the limbo into that room, but yeah, Mercury was kind of the classroom for a while. It really was. They had the best sound in town for a long time, and yeah, I had some fun shows there, and like everything else, the world changed, and that was a great room. Brownies was a great room, a completely different vibe, but it was much more of the.
I don't know that place.
Brownies was it was on Avenue A, Avenue A and 13th, and it was like the indie cred room. Where Mercury was great, but had a little more of a kind of a corporate vibe. Like if you were showcasing at Mercury, you were, you were major label fodder and all this.
Yeah.
And Brownies was really prided itself on being the indie cred room. So if you were, that kind of band that you played Brownies, and they would just pack the shit out of that room. And I saw some amazing shows in there.
Yeah.
Really small, narrow place, but what a great venue. A guy named Mike Studo ran it for years and then reopened it after it closed. This place called Hi-Fi, and then started having music again there. And it's now a music venue. I think Jesse Malin is one of the guys who's running it.
Oh, yeah.
And
is that Niagara? No,
although that is one of his spots as well.
Yeah.
He's got Niagara. He's a partner in a place called Bowery Electric, which is also a great room. But I cannot think of the name of what Brownies currently is.
Why did you leave there to go to LA?
It was nothing to do with New York. It was a lovely woman who made me an offer I couldn't refuse, and came out to visit. It was sort of an open. It was an open-ended ticket. Come visit, see what you think, and I sort of never went back.
Yeah.
So that's so it was a shift. I was a dyed-in-the-wool New Yorker, so it was a lot to get used to. Getting back into car culture, which was definitely alien to me at that point.
Definitely.
But I do love it. There was just so much here that was a complete turnaround for my head that I think was positive, and frankly, I spent my whole life in the Northeast. I was done with winter. I was just done with it. It's really, people say, oh, don't you miss the snow? No, I really don't. I just plain don't. So that's a positive aspect for me as well.
Yeah. Well, good, man. Sunny California.
But I met amazing people. I mean, so the level of musicianship out here is just astounding.
Yeah.
And there are some great positive things here too that you can't do in New York. I mean, and most of them have to do with real estate. There's more room for things.
Yeah.
You can store equipment.
Yeah.
I remember the first couple of gigs here. It's like, oh, right. You can just bring everything to the gig because you pull your car up in front and just unload. Hey, keyboardist wants to bring 5 keyboards. Sure.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, right. You don't have to drag it on the G train,
I had an experience at the fucking Mercury Lounge one time where our guitar tech had to drive our van around from sound check until the end of the gig because he could not find a parking space for our van and trailer.
Nowhere to put it. Yeah, you just it had to be like the limo driver who's just paid to keep it idling out front. You just have to circulate
that part
until the show is over.
Yeah. I've always fantasized of living in that city and all that stuff. And then one time I was there and I was really hungover and had to go across town with like my guitar and my fucking suitcase and just took trains and walking in the smelly ass streets. And I was like, how do people even live here? And then I was just like, man, it's very romantic and it's beautiful. But like I live in Texas, I live in Austin. Like I drive to my gigs. I can, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I can take my amp.
Right. Right. Or and a backup if you need to.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I got to the point where people would ask me about, what do you, for amps, what do you like? And this, and I just said, to me, the best piece of gear in the world is the one I don't have to carry. That is my favorite amp in the world. So whatever piece of crap they got for a house amp, I love this amp because it means I ain't carrying it in and I ain't carrying it out.
Yeah.
Because subway stairs with an amp and a guitar on your back, that's no joke.
What part of LA are you in?
I'm in Silver Lake.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So it's
I like it out there in Silver Lake.
Yeah, it's a nice vibe here, and it's quiet, and I've got a great neighbor across the street. I kind of lucked out there, and he and I have become very good friends, and it's a cool neighborhood. A lot of musicians here. Just one street over, my neighbor is Daniel Lanois. So there's all kinds of interesting folks who are around.
I love that guy.
He's an interesting cat, man. Obviously love his work, and he lives in this sort of Italianate fantasy that was built in the 1920s. That's completely hidden, in the trees. But it's a remarkable, like this castle up there, and he does evenings up there periodically where he sets up and plays, and they'll do a show, and it's incredible.
Oh
yeah. And so I've been over there. I've been over there a couple times, and the whole great room, which is sort of would have been the main formal dining room. That's studio setup. The gear is in there, consoles in there. He's got, 2 Neve sidecars to the left and right of the main, Trident console, and he's got all his mics set up. There's 2 grand pianos in there, and that's it. It's right there. That's the living space.
Oh, how cool.
And they're just Grammys all over the place.
Of course they are.
They're just like, they're stuck in like curio cabinets. Like, all right, there's another one over there.
Yeah.
But he's an amazing guy.
Yeah. How did you meet Mark Mothersbaugh?
My girlfriend has been friends with him for 25 years.
Oh, wow.
She's a designer. Primarily does production design for commercials and features, but he actually talked to her years back because he wanted to put like a scrolling signage on the top of the Mutato Music Building that he owns on Sunset Boulevard. So he wanted to do like a jumbotron kind of thing, but it would be for his art. So she had a reputation as they did big builds, for production design. Right. So, and she was also an artist trained as a fine artist at RISD. And so she was just a good person to talk to about the possibility of doing that. So they came up with some preliminary designs. He never ended up doing it, but they got to be friends and have just stayed friends. And so we're dear friends with him and his wife and their kids. And
it's a huge inspiration. What a cool artist he is and has been just the whole time. Sorry, go ahead.
I know, and the depth of his talent is remarkable. I mean, it goes well beyond that kind of tip of the iceberg that people know.
Yeah.
As a fine artist, which is really his passion, particularly at this point.
Yeah.
He can't stop making work. He's constant. He does, in particular, the thing not a lot of people know about is he does these postcard artworks where he collects antique postcards and then he does original artworks on them. And he does them every day. and he has done them I think he's done maybe 40,000 of them.
Jesus.
Everyone different. And they've been compiled in a few books, here and there. And I think he's got another book that's coming out soon that's really going to be a major volume that shows the whole depth of that. But so on top of the music, and he's constantly making works of art just sort of tumbles out of him.
That's great, man. What an inspiration to get to be friends with somebody like that that's just so creative.
Yeah, it's been great, and Mutado is such a cool place, and obviously his collection of synths is pretty remarkable. He's got everything that ever was. Mark has it. He had.
He's in fucking Devo.
I know. I mean, he had Tonto at one point, which was the gigantic modular synth that Bob Margouleff designed that was in Phantom of the Paradise and inner sleeve of the Stevie Wonder albums. So he had that at one point. He's got all. Anyway, you can imagine.
Yeah.
There. So it's quite a playground over there.
I was, I think, 10 or 11, and my first experience was seeing those guys on Saturday Night Live, and I was like, somebody made a band specifically for me and my energy at this point in my life. You know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah,
I was spending the night at a friend's house, and like our jaws were on the floor, just like, what the fuck is this? Went into the record store, bought Are We Not Men, and just was sold. Like, what a fucking amazing band.
I mean, their story is really pretty incredible. I mean, the fact that something that was so out there, so left of center, was able to break through on a completely commercial level was just, I mean, there's no way to engineer that. Yeah. And the fact that they were huge. I mean, really, before they even had a record deal, these were just singles that they kind of recorded themselves, and they were making little piecemeal deals here and there. They went to UK, and Stiff put out a couple singles there. But when they made the first record, they didn't have a deal. Wow. That was done on spec, by Brian Eno, and it was Bowie who was supposed to produce the record.
Jesus.
And then he had a scheduling conflict. And so he said, Brian Eno's very interested. And so they ended up doing with him. That was before there was even a deal on the table.
Wow. I heard a great interview with him sometime over the last couple of years that he talked about kind of how their thing was structured, how they turned in all their stuff in the artwork. Like they got a small amount of money up front to have freedom.
Yes. Well, that was Mark and Jerry's concept from the beginning, is that we will take a lower royalty if you will allow us, if you will indulge us. Like they wanted to do stuff like die cuts and gatefolds and they said, no, too expensive. They said, well, give us less money. Yeah. Take it out of our royalty. It's important that this gets done. And the other thing that they did is all the money they made, they rolled back in to Devo, which is, from an accounting perspective, particularly in show business, is never done. Never put your own money in the show, kid.
Right.
But they did, so they wanted to make these, when they wanted to tour and do these incredible things, they paid for all that. They just paid right back into it until it became, almost unstable. Yeah. There just wasn't enough money because they wanted to keep developing that.
Yeah, that's a tough, man, when you're on that level and you're always having to top yourself. It'd be pretty difficult to be Devo after like 10 years, It was very hard. Like when they did the tour for Oh No, It's Devo, the concept was 3 Devo. They wanted to do a live 3D video representation of the band. So they actually, were interacting with video that was, on a screen behind them. And they were interacting in real time in cues, which was at the time, it was 1980, 83 or something. The technology really wasn't there to sync all this stuff up in a way that you could do completely seamlessly now. So every night they were out there really working to make this come together. Jesus. Was MIDI or SMPTE or anything like that's the very dawn of it?
it would have been very early on in MIDI if it was really
Jesus.
there. I mean, it was like using, time code, like film time code, and they had click tracks, and you can see that, Alan, the drummer, he's on a click the whole time, had to be, because if you missed a move, you weren't in sync with the action that was happening on the screen behind them. So they had it down, and those guys, man, they rehearsed the hell out of that stuff.
Jesus Christ, man.
And there is a video of that show, because that was one of the earliest pay-per-view programs as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it was in 3D, so you were, supposed to watch with 3D glasses, because what they were doing was not. There had to be yet another level, But there's a pretty good cleaned up version of that video that's on YouTube of the whole show.
Oh man, I'll look that up and watch it.
Yeah,
I'll also watch. Did he interview you on a YouTube? I didn't want to watch it because I didn't want to try and not talk about stuff you talked about with him or or whatever.
Yeah. It was that was actually a podcast that's done by
Two people.
a woman in LA.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's Rain Phoenix, and her sister.
Okay.
And it's called Launch Left.
Okay.
And so the idea is they pick a noteworthy artist or subject, and then ask that person to pick someone that they would like to have on the show. So they approached Mark, and Mark said, "Well, I want to have Ward on the show." So
that's great.
We're interviewed together on that.
Fantastic, man.
Yeah.
I will. It's video?
It is video.
Good.
Yeah.
I'll
And
watch
we
it after this tonight.
yeah, it's pretty good. We shot it at Mutato.
Cool.
And then there's a little live performance at the end of that.
Awesome, man.
Yeah, that was fun.
So, do you have any interest in coming to stuff like to South by Southwest or something?
Sure.
Or yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, if I ever go to LA, I'll definitely. We should meet up.
Yeah, I would be happy to do that. You just holler at me.
Yeah.
I'm around.
Yeah.
As they say.
You are around. Me too, man.
I am around.
If you're ever down here.
Yeah. Yeah.
The ice cream chords, which is hackneyed chord changes, right?
Yes.
That's what
that's the old, the old timey songwriter parlance for stock chord changes, and the standard they say is it's 1-6-2-5.
Yeah. This is my favorite chord change.
Yeah, it's basically everything.
Every great
everything.
Song.
Yeah, it is. It's everything in the doo-wop era, but it actually has earlier antecedents. You look back in the Great American Songbook stuff. That's like Heart and Soul and Blue Moon.
Yeah.
These songs going back to the 30s are using those sorts of sequences. So it got to a point where it's just like, oh man, using them ice cream chords again.
Yeah.
Which I just as a term, I like the language of it. And it is pretty evocative, and I think it's accurate too, because the idea is it's sweet and it's cloying, and nobody can resist it. You're gonna use it, whether you're a listener or a songwriter. You're gonna gravitate to that because it feels right.
Yeah, it does feel right.
So I think part of this was, when you write, you often find yourself actively resisting the urge to go to these comfortable places harmonically. So I'll often say, nope, can't do that because it's just too hack. I can't do it.
I'll move and start writing on bass and with a drum machine. And when I go figure out the chords that I did with the bass, they go 6. And I'm always like, fuck.
Yep, there's no escape. There's no escape, and for good reason. Nothing succeeds like success.
That's right.
We're not imagining that this sounds right.
Right.
It just does.
It just does.
But for this record, I thought there was. It's a bit of a jab at myself, because when I was writing this, I was like, well, maybe I won't resist so much, and some of these songs will be a little more, accessible than some previous stuff, and not in any really deliberate, active way. I wrote what I wanted to write, but I think there is a bit of that. This record is maybe a little lighter and a little more pop centric than some of the previous ones.
Yeah, it got me, man. That's for sure.
Oh, well, I'm so glad.
Yeah, it'll be out by the time this podcast comes out, so people can go find the ice cream chords. Go to wardwhite.net for all of your Ward White needs. And, dude, I love your songs. I love your voice.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Johnny.
You're fucking great, man. And I hope we get to meet sometime, man. It's really
absolutely. I would
really
love to.
Inspiring listening to this record.
I'm so thrilled and really flattered. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Anything I'm missing? I mean, I'm sure there's tons of stuff I'm missing.
Geez. Pretty open-ended question there.
Anything that the people
now
need to know before we go is what I mean.
Oh, no. Just, records out, as we say, December 2nd, and video will be out probably by the time this is out. So go look for that Mezcal Moth video.
Yeah.
And, I will ideally be out in the world doing some live stuff sooner than later for this record. So keep your eyes and ears peeled for that.
Yeah. They can follow you on the Facebook. You're not on Instagram?
I'm not. I have to say I am really remiss with regard to social media. I have been one of the great resistors. I have a hard time interacting with it. And I know that's terrible. I'm shooting myself in the foot with it. I'm not passing any sort of qualitative judgment on it. It's just, I'm bad at it. I'm bad at promoting myself. I always have been. Anytime I get into the mode to do it, I just feel dirty somehow. And I know I shouldn't.
No, you
so
should.
I don't have.
You should. No, I mean, you should. I feel like people, there's no shame anymore. There should be some shame. Like,
yeah.
Not everyone cares that you just got a new dishwasher.
Oh God, I definitely, I believe in the fourth wall. I think it serves a purpose.
Yeah.
And when I was growing up and the people I looked up to, the great stars, I wanted them to be superhuman. I did not want to know what they had for breakfast. This is not relevant to my experience. I want to be able to engage with the work, and that is plenty for me.
Yeah.
I
think part of me wanted to see Kiss without their makeup, but the other part of me, it would have been ruined. It's like seeing the guy standing on the stool moving the levers instead of the Wizard of Oz himself.
It's funny that you mentioned that. One of my oldest friends, Adam Cohen, back when I was growing up in Connecticut, his father grew up in Brooklyn playing in bands in the 60s. And he played in a ton of bands with a guy named Paulie Caravallo, who then changed his name to Eric Carr. So he was the, second drummer in Kiss. But when Adam was a kid, I don't know, probably 10 or 11 years old, Kiss had done a show in, I don't know, they did Madison Square Garden or something. And they came out and visited Victor's house because, Eric Carr was in the band. So there are some Polaroids that he's had his whole life. They're there without makeup, standing around the pool in the suburban finished basement with my little red-haired friend when he was 10. And it's like, oh, he got to see him. He got to see him unmasked.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, those are interesting keeps. And I told him he's another person who's not on social media. I'm like, you would be a superstar. Just go on and post those photos, and you will. Your followership will swell beyond any imaginable means. No interest.
No interest. Well, I will send you links to all of this when it comes out and tag you on the Facebook, but you'll also be on Instagram and Twitter.
Maybe someday.
No. The show will be out there.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh,
so
I will be. Yes, I trust. I much prefer someone else talking about me than me talking about me.
Yeah.
So,
well, I'll be talking about you, man.
That works out just great for me.
Well, Ward, this has been great, man. Great talking to you. I'm looking forward to talking to you again. Hopefully, we'll meet in person one day.
I hope so. It's really, really been a pleasure, Johnny, and I appreciate you having me on the show.
Thanks for reaching out.
I'm glad I did.
Yeah, man. Me too. Cheers.
All right. Cheers.
Bye, buddy.
See ya. Bye.
Can you offer insight into his regime and your unfired?
That was Ward White. His record, Ice Cream Chords, available now wherever it is you stream and download music. Gang, it is his 14th album. So he's got shitloads of other music out there for you to get into if you get into this dude. All right? I want to thank Ward for doing the show. I really enjoyed talking to him. I hope he stays in touch. I love his music, and I did enjoy our hang. Gang, when you're out there checking out wardwhite.com or looking up Ice Cream Chords, the album, don't forget that you can subscribe to this podcast wherever it is that you find podcasts, be it Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, Overcast. New shows every Tuesday, every Friday. Been dropping those from the Vault episodes. Yeah, baby. Go back and listen, dude. The one from Saturday is fucking great, man. David Comey, the attorney that rocks. If you've ever been to Austin or you live in Austin, you've seen the billboards or seen his things on the side of a bus. You're like, who the fuck is that guy? Go check that one out. All right, and go check out Ice Cream Chords. What a great record. Great record. Have a great week, whatever it is you're doing. Let's get down.
Knocking since you missed the early show. No one's left to mind the store. Ditch the ballads and go straight to your encore. Would you care to comment? We're going live. Ooh, can you offer insight into his regime and your unfired? Yeah, you're unfired. Miss Karma, you're complicating everything. Miss Karma, you're complicating everything. Feel my hearts just screaming when it's time to sing. God knows I'm singing it all. The sailor dreams of boat, the boat dreams of the sail, the ocean dreams of slimy things with water spouts and scale, while I dream of a mop, that mop dreams of a pail. The janitor just cleans into the Widowmaker. Walk and give up showbiz. Beckham House and Project Hill. Feeling sloppy on the dregs of Burgundy. There's a little yellow pill that your mother had the chemist hold for me. Would you care to comment? You're going live.